Hi there and welcome. My name is Michael Kentenich and I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer. In this video, we will learn how to unlock the power of seamless authentication with managed identities. Imagine a world where your applications effortlessly authenticate and interact with Azure services, free from the hassle of managing intricate authentication protocols or credentials. That's the magic of managed identities. Here's a scenario. Meet Mia, a developer at a thriving e-commerce company. Mia is tasked with enhancing the security and efficiency of their applications hosted on Azure. However, managing service principals and credentials has become cumbersome and error-prone. One day, Mia discovers managed identities. Now applications authenticate securely without handling credentials. Security is boosted, productivity soars. No more sleepless nights worrying about keys or secrets. It's all automated, secure, and efficient. Managed identities make your work more secure and effective and lets you focus on what truly matters, building great software solutions. So, are you ready to unlock this power? Let's dive in. In this video, I will explain the differences between the two types of managed identities and also describe the flow for user and system-assigned managed identities. We will see how to configure those managed identities and how to acquire an access token by using REST or code. Managed identities address this described challenge, making sure all service principals' passwords are frequently rotated. To keep the window of opportunity to crack the password low enough in case an attacker gets their hands on the hash of it. The rotation is managed for you. In a nutshell, system-assigned identities are automatically generated and tied to specific resources, while user-assigned identities are explicitly created and offer more flexibility in access control management. You can use managed identities for Azure resources to sign into services that work with Microsoft Entra ID authentication. The examples in this video will use Azure virtual machines, but you can do the same things and similar actions with any resource in Azure that supports Microsoft Entra ID authentication, like an Azure Container Instance or an Azure Kubernetes service and the others listed on this slide. Turning your attention to the whiteboard, I will outline the flow of requiring an access token for a managed identity on a virtual machine. On this whiteboard, I will explain how a system-assigned managed identity works with a virtual machine. The desired outcome is that I want to have code running on or within that virtual machine, and this code should be able to get an access token on behalf of that virtual machine's identity to access another Azure resource like a storage account. The first step that you need to take is you enable that system-assigned managed identity on the virtual machine resource. That is a feature of the VM itself. Not only for virtual machines available, but also for app services, AKS clusters, and others. And what that will do is it will create a resource called a system-assigned managed identity. We also have the user-assigned managed identity, but that is a different approach. We would like to have one that is bound to the lifecycle of that virtual machine and cannot be shared with any other resources. So just short for managed identity, of course, the MI here. What happens when you create this system-assigned managed identity? It will create an identity within an Entra ID tenant. In that Entra ID tenant, it will create an object that is called an enterprise application or a service principal, just another name for this. This is now part of that Entra ID tenant, and this principal can then be used to provide permissions for it to other resources. So I can go ahead and configure my storage account or any other Azure resource using role-based access control to grant access through or for this service principal to the storage account. Like role-based access control, this is the feature and the feature that we set up, and we need to assign it a role, a specific role that gives it the right. And for this scenario here, let's say we want to assign it the blob reader role, which will allow it to read blobs but not change them, modify them, delete them, and so on. So the second step is now done. So the service principal is set up to have permissions on another Azure service, in this case, the storage account. Now, of course, we could have other scenarios where the same service principal has access to an Azure Key Vault or app configuration or other services where it makes sense for code running on a virtual machine access this. Now, but how does it work to get an access token from the code on the virtual machine in this scenario? How does it do it? So it is using an instance metadata service, which is a service that is integrated, built into that virtual machine resource or the other service where we have this. And what this instance does, what this instance metadata service does, it provides an endpoint that is only routable from within that virtual machine. So this is the URL with this internally non-routable IP address that can only be reached from inside of that virtual machine with the specific endpoint URI here in that case. And the code will then contact this service and will require a token saying, hey, I need access to resources, so get me a token, an access token for this identity, the one for the virtual machine, in or of the Entra ID tenant. So what happens, the service will, on behalf of that identity, request the actual access token on behalf of that system-assigned managed identity that belongs to the virtual machine. And everything checks out. If the service principal is there, it's valid, it's correctly configured, it will return the access token to the service. The service will return it to the code. And then the next step, and the last one, the code can actually reach out and use this access token in a request directly to the storage account to get access, and in this case, be able to read the blobs in that storage account and its containers. And be aware that this means that everything and everyone that has this access token will have access to this resource. And that is how the flow with a managed system, system-assigned managed identity works on a virtual machine. To enable a system-assigned managed identity for a virtual machine, you need to have at least a virtual machine contributor role assigned to your account. That's already pretty high up the chain, but you need no other role or permission since it's a feature of the Azure Virtual Machine resource itself. Your account requires the Managed Identity Contributor role assignment to create a user-assigned managed identity, as this is a separate resource type. Once you have created the user-assigned managed identity, you can assign it to one or more resources. And how do we do this? On the left, you see an Azure CLI example to create a virtual machine and enable the system-assigned managed identity as part of the creation process. On the right, the first line creates the user-assigned managed identity, the second creates a virtual machine, and then assigns the now existing user-assigned managed identity to it. The Azure VM create command uses the same parameter, but by providing a name, it already recognized the managed identity as user-assigned. Let's turn words into action and let me show you how to enable a managed identity on a virtual machine and make use of it. In this video, I want to show you how I can access a blob file that is stored in a blob container in a storage account by using the system-assigned managed identity of a virtual machine that I have created and nothing else. So this virtual machine I have already created is called VM Contoso ESTS001. It's an Ubuntu machine that runs and it has a network configuration that we can see here on the right-hand side. The private IP address of this virtual machine is 0.10.0.0.4, and I'm connecting to the public IP address to get an SSH session for that virtual machine so I can run some commands. With this virtual machine, I have already enabled a system assigned managed identity. You can tell here that if we look at the identity node, the system assigned identity, the one that we can have for that one system, is already enabled. It shows the service principal ID in here. And what that means is that my virtual machine has now its own identity in my Microsoft Entra ID tenant that my subscription is trusting. Now, what I want to do is I have this storage account as a Contoso ECS 001 with a data container in it. And in that container, we have a build text file. If I open this file up, you can see it has just some random text. The title here that you might want to look out for is build on an end-to-end platform for innovation. The idea would be to see that text later on the virtual machine. And just to show you that if I copy the URL of that file and put it in my browser session, where I just see that it uses here the name of the storage account with the service URL and the container and the blob name. If I try to open this, it gives me a message saying, no, public access is not permitted, so I cannot open this file from anywhere where I don't have an authenticated user right now. And that's not the case if I just use this URL. Now, let's switch to my SSH session just to prove that, sort of prove that this is the virtual machine. This is the host name. We can hopefully recognize this. On the left, you can still see it. And if I check the IP configuration, you can tell here at least it has this Azure private IP address 10.0.0.4. Now, what I want to do and show you is how to gather or access or get, actually that's the right term, to get an access token. An access token that will tell us, actually will not tell us right away, but if I do use this curl command, connecting to the internal IP address of the so-called IMDS system, that is the instance metadata service, that will then check if we, or actually will get an access token and see what kind of resources this virtual machine with its identity that it already has can access. So what I should see when I fire this up is a wall of text. And in this wall of text, of course, there's a hashed access token in that. So I'd like to store this now. So just that I showed you now, let's store this now in a variable where I say, let's store this as an access token so we can reuse it. I will change this here so that we have that stored in now this variable. So access token should now have the same information. And let's try to use another curl command where we try to access the storage account now. So let me clear this up again, and then I will paste this in. Now you see I'm accessing with curl the storage account with the same URL that I have used before. I provide a header here with the version, and I carry over that bearer token, which we just right now stored in that access token variable. Let's see if that works. And of course it doesn't, because other than enabling this managed identity, I did not grant an access to the storage account yet. So yeah, it is actually giving me an error message saying, no, you're not authorized. And that's totally correct, because I have missed that one step. If I now go back to my storage account, what I need to do is I need to allow the virtual machine's identity now to have access to the container or the storage account, whatever I need here. So let's say we want to grant access now to the container itself. I don't need anything else. So I'm going to the access control and identity access management node. I will add here a role assignment. And since we're working with blobs, so let's see what we have in stock for blobs. Reading is good enough for me. So storage blob data reader gives that identity that I'm going to configure now read access to blob containers and the data in it. And now I will go over to the members. I will switch here from user group service principal to managed identity. And from here, I will check for the available ones. I have only one associated with a virtual machine. And yeah, that's the one that I just showed you. So I will add this. What happens now is if I do this, if I assign this, we get that RBAC role assigned to that storage account container specifically now. And once this has been done, I will go back. Maybe I wait a little bit more. So let's just check. Let's look for VM, and here's the VM, and I can see that it has been added. Cool. So now let's switch back to the virtual machine. We do the same thing again. So I will first get a new access token. And then I will try to get access to that file that I have used right now. And there it is. There's the content of that file. So with the new access token, we now got the information that, yeah, with the current configuration, that identity of the virtual machine has access to that particular resource. Or by using that access token with a specific configuration, now we can access that resource. And here you have it. You have access to a file or any other Azure service just by using the managed identity. And I can do this from an application in code or using REST API call, as I just did, without the need to provide any hard-coded credentials. In this video, I explained the differences between the two types of managed identities. I described the flow for user and system-assigned management identities on a virtual machine, and we saw how to configure managed identities. I also showed you an example in a demo how to acquire an access token by using REST API and code. Congratulations on exploring managed identities and their role in deploying secure solutions on Azure. By eliminating the need to manage credentials manually, you are empowered to enhance security and streamline access management in your applications. With managed identities, simplify your authentication workflows and ensure secure access to Azure resources effortlessly. Thanks for watching. Keep on learning.